So this is session 2 of what I'm calling Sunday School Stories, and today looking at a favourite, which is Moses and the bulrushes. Now the Hebrew people had moved down to Egypt in a time of drought because they knew that grain was available in Egypt, and this was only because Joseph had foreseen the drought and stored up grain, and so they had grain to sell. So the father and the brothers of Joseph came down, and they were allowed to settle in the area of Egypt called Goshen. Pharaoh was very grateful for Joseph, so he was very happy to let the family all settle there. However, after some time, that Pharaoh had died and things had moved on, and a new Pharaoh didn't really know anything about Joseph. And now this time the Hebrew people were growing very much in number, and he got anxious about that, and so he decided the best thing to do was to make them slaves. But that didn't seem to stop their growth in numbers, and so his next step was that all Hebrew boys, when they were born, were to be put in the river to drown. Now, we don't know the name of Moses' mother or father. They were just ordinary Hebrew people. But the mother saw that this boy was a very fine baby boy, and she hid him for a few months until she couldn't hide him any longer. And that's when she made this basket out of reeds and made it waterproof, put the baby in it, and put him in reeds at the side of the Nile River. And his sister stood back to see what would happen. Then Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe with some of her attendants, and she saw the basket and she was curious. Then she found that there was a baby inside it, and she knew it was one of the Hebrew babies, but she felt sorry for him and she wanted to keep him. So sister Miriam came running over and said, "Would you like me to find a Hebrew lady to nurse the baby?" And she said, "Oh yes, that would be good." So Miriam took the baby back to his mother, and she nursed him until he was weaned, and then he went to live in the palace. Now, was that just a lucky break for Moses? I don't think so, because God had a plan for Moses right from the time that he was born, long before he ever met the burning bush. He wanted to make sure that Moses survived. And more than that, he organised it for Pharaoh's daughter to be there at that time and for have it in her heart to take this baby and look after it. Because God wanted Moses to be familiar with the Egyptian ways, wanted him to have the education that he was going to need. God's plans for Moses were in place well before he encountered a bush burning in the desert. The writer of Psalm 139 knows the truths that our lives are not an accident. Verse 16 he writes, "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." Similar words in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 5. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Acts 17:26 says a similar thing about nations themselves. It says, "He marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their land." Our lives are not an accident. God has a plan and a purpose for each one. Now some lives are short, some are long. Some are lived in perhaps some tiny little obscure village, others are lived right on the world stage. It doesn't matter, because each one is important to God's plan. Moses' mother is not even named, but if she'd not kept her baby, if Pharaoh's daughter had not been sent down to the river at that moment, just at the right time, the awesome exodus of the Hebrew people may not have been able to happen.